Welcome to Buckets, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer, joined for this Eastern Conference post All-Star Futures episode by the NBA Futures analyst himself, back from the dregs of the NFL and fresh off of absolutely whipping my ass and Joe Delera in the All-Star draft that we did last week. It's Brandon Anderson. Brandon, I am just going to let you take a victory lap because, frankly, you killed it.
It was a fun All-Star weekend, which is not a thing you always get to say. We actually enjoyed a dunk contest, right? We got some real dunks, not just Mac McClung. Shouts to Trey Murphy, a pretty good runner-up. I mean, everyone was pretty good. 3 points. This came down to the last shot. Dame hit our starry shots. I know you're excited about that one. I'm not going to victory lap Damian Lillard, in part because my literal best bet was Buddy Hield, and in part because Buddy was the better shooter and should have won that event. So happy to have it. I'm pleased to have come up with my last second fill-in Jason Tatum MVP pick, which was really, truly not on my radar, even entering that podcast. And in full disclosure, I came into that podcast when we recorded like Thursday night, hours after Giannis got hurt, and I learned that live as we were recording because I was coming back from church that night. So I'm happy to have come up with just like the live audible Jason Tatum. And again, not that happy though, because I actually bet Donovan Mitchell like we talked about, and I would have rather Tatum just missed a couple shots and lost the bucket spot and won the bet. But fun weekend, get a little break now, and this is kind of the reset. This is 25 games left. And I've kind of done the process of, hey, this is like, it's a new free season, but we have a lot more data this time, but we've got win totals and divisions and all the odds are back up. We have this little window. So it's fun to dig back in and settle in for the stretch run here.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the 3-point contest. If you want to, hit me up on Twitter and I'll be glad to rant to you in detail about just how mad I am that these bullshit starry shots, I don't care that guys take them in. Like, my thing is, if you want to have a long distance 3-point competition, have a long bet 3-point distance competition, and I'll bet on that too. But if you're going to have like the normal shooters in there, having it literally come down to like, Dame's the only one that can hit these starry shots, the only one on the starry shot. I'm not going to talk about it. We're going to do Eastern Conference on this episode. You can catch in this feed the Western Conference tomorrow. So you can also catch the same episode across 2 feeds. We're on Buckets and we're on the Action Network podcast. If you're subscribed to one, you should subscribe to the other. If you are not subscribed to one, you should subscribe to that one. And you should check out both episodes. Also download both of them. Help us out. We really appreciate it. What we're going to do is we're going to basically go through Eastern Conference. We're going to go not team by team. We're not going to go all of them. I'm not going to talk about the Detroit Pistons today, but we're going to talk about the relevant playoff futures that we have on these kind of teams. We do have some content coming on the tank teams that you can find in the app, on the award-winning Action Network app. Best way for you to track your picks. We have a roundtable coming up on kind of where we think those are going to go, how to bet those situations. You can cover that there. We're going to go team by team, hit the big highlights. We'll give you some best bets on what we're looking at as far as bets to win the Eastern Conference. We're going to start, obviously, at the top. The Celtics currently at FanDuel their live win total is 58.5. They are plus 115 to win the Eastern Conference title. I'm not going to give the title odds because we're doing conferences, so I want to stick to the conferences. They are minus 175 to win the number 1 seed. Minus 175. They have 17 losses. The Milwaukee Bucks have 17 losses. The Philadelphia 76ers have 19 losses. And the Cleveland Cavaliers have 23 losses. Brandon and I have both done projections. I don't want to rattle off all of them team by team. I will ask you for certain ones and we'll skip other ones. But let's go ahead and start here. What do you have the Celtics projected to finish at as far as wins go at 58.5 line the rest of the way?
So I've got them at 57 wins. And in this case, I'm a little less scientific on these. I started with a more scientific number, and then I eyeball the schedule because to me, this last 25 games, the nuance of the schedule, who are you playing, who may or may not be tanking, what's the last week look like, who might be resting, those things I don't think are necessarily captured in a strength of schedule sort of thing. So this is a little bit of like, okay, well, now that I've done the work on these teams, literally go through the schedule and okay, let's a win here, a loss here. Here's where you split a couple games, etc. This line a couple days ago was 59.5. So obviously money is coming in on the under. I would have leaned under 59.5. I would still lean under 58.5. I just said I project them at 57. Lean under that number is the same thing we've talked about. 60 wins is a lot. It's hard to win a lot of basketball games. But guess what? We did this before the season and we said, wow, whatever the number is a lot. It's hard to win. Oh, look, they're winning all the games. So I thought maybe Jaylen Brown would miss a little bit of time with a facial injury. And then it turns out he's going one-on-one in the All-Star game. So that's apparently not a thing. I don't think they're going to have to push too hard for the 1 seed. I know you said the numbers there, they're pretty close, but it looks like Giannis maybe would miss some time. I don't know who's going to push Boston. For me, with the Celtics, I can have them coasting into the 1 seed. I would be looking less to play a win total, more at maybe is this an award spot? I'm not excited about the Joe Mazzulla Coach of the Year or about Malcolm Brogdon, 6th man. It doesn't feel like that's a really buzzy narrative thing. I guess, Mazzulla took over, just got the full-time job, like a little more narrative there. It feels to me like both of those would be by default wins, but default wins us money too. I know we're not really doing awards too much here, but for me, if I'm looking to play a Celtics angle, if you're the 1 seed, you're going to get some sort of award, something. And I think that one of those is probably the way to go.
Okay, so let's kind of start here. Let's about the win total first off. Yeah. If you have not bet the Celtics yet, if you're listening to this podcast and you stayed away from the preseason where I was I have a full max position on Celtics under 55.5. That's the number. I got a 56.5 position. I got a 53.5 position. Most of my money came in at 55.5. What's surprising actually is we're within I'm within shouting distance. It looked for a while like this was going to be 63-64 and it was going to be dead by now. And instead, I'm live. I need them to dip a little bit and I might be able to squeak under the 55.5, lose the 53.5 and not lose my shirt. I still have them projected right now at 57.5. I was projecting them lower a little bit. An interesting thing on my projections is that I'm not taking their full season numbers and projecting that as an absolute. I take how many wins they've already gotten and then my power rating times an average win mark. And that's how we kind of come out at what the figure should be. And so it already factors in their prior success in November, which is I feel better about because it means if I just take how good are the Celtics and how many games should that team win across 82 games, the number's lower. I do it this way because I want to be well, it doesn't really matter if they should have won fewer games. Yep. They've already won them. Here's my question for you. We both lean under if you haven't entered this market. I have them at 57.4, which is a full win under the 58.5 mark. Since I have this dreadful liability here on the Celtics at under 55.5, should I lay the minus 175 as a hedge? Because is there a scenario in which they go I don't know how I would lose it. Is there a way in which they win? Can they win 59 and the Sixers or Bucks win 60?
I mean, yes, they could do that. That is a thing that could happen. It's really, really hard to see that happening. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, too, of the numbers you said, if you're looking for a not award thing here, a win total, a 1 seed of something, and we're not doing title odds, I think the 1 seed number is not terrible. I've got them at 57. You mentioned with your projections, I have a similar thing kind of baked in where I said, okay, we've got 23 Celtics games left. What's my expectation based on the deeper numbers just for those 23? And then I don't really care about the previous ones. They're done. We just have those wins and losses already. So I kind of have a similar setup. I have my next closest team in the East is 3 wins off the pace. That's not insignificant when we're down to 20 games here. 3 wins is a pretty solid cushion. So at minus 175, I'm thinking in my head, is that something like mid 60% implied? That's not terrible. I feel like I probably would put Boston higher than that.
So I don't think it's a good bet if you haven't entered the market.
Yeah.
Right. So like the key here is that I'm getting essentially an at market number to hedge out of my 55.5. That's the only context in which I think it has value. I think if you're entering the market fresh and you're like, I want to bet on the number one seed, then I'm like, look, there's enough variance here. I think you can go in a different direction and probably have a little bit of value, because what's interesting though here is, look, the Celtics, arguably, you can very reasonably argue the Celtics have already dipped. They were without Marcus Smart. The offense went to shit without Marcus Smart there for a couple of weeks. Then they lost Jaylen Brown. Like, they've been pretty mediocre here over this last stretch of games, because they were really, really banged up. And like every team's had that. Like the Sixers had their stretch without Harden and Maxey. The Bucks had their stretch without Chris Middleton. So like everybody's got these stretches. I don't project the Celtics to be less healthy the rest of the way. They got Marcus Smart back. They got Jaylen Brown back going in like All-Star game, so he's going to play coming out. Robert Williams is a question mark, but they were fine without him before. So I kind of feel like I can't look at it and be like the Celtics. I said we're going to I kept saying this in December, November. The Celtics were going to regress. They have. They just haven't regressed enough for me to get under the number of 55. So I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bet the minus 175 and get out of my position on that to just go ahead and even out.
I think that makes sense. And especially because you asked me, is it possible? Could they go over the number and still not be the one seed? Sure, it's possible. A lot of things are possible. I think it's more likely and more possible they could still potentially backdoor hit your 55 and hit the under and still be the one seed. And you might actually have like a middle where you end up with both of those.
Yeah.
I think that's a more likely outcome, just because I don't know that there's going to be a big push. If there's a push, it had to be, I think, from Philly, not Milwaukee. The Bucks, well, they know they've been here before. They don't need the one seed. They've won a title. I think the Sixers would love the one seed, not just because of the home court, but because getting the one seed for Philly means, I only have to play Boston or Milwaukee now. That sounds pretty good to me. So if the push does come, it's from them. But now you're a little further back, and I think they're too far for the push. So I like it.
East title plus 115. It's a short number, right? Like, they're getting a bunch of bumps here. They're getting a very public team in the Celtics. Made the finals last year, MVP candidate. Like, they have a lot of wave behind that number, right? They have a lot of momentum behind that number. I don't know. I don't think it's wrong. I don't think that that's a bad number. I don't look at the Celtics and go, that's a bad number. They're vulnerable. The way I have kind of started to look at the Eastern Conference, it's weird because, I was down on them in the regular season, and I stand by a lot of that analysis. And we're seeing that, like, it wasn't bad because it is close enough. Again, we talked about it. 55 is a high number. I think for the Eastern Conference title, do I think that the Bucks beat them last year with Middleton? I do. I just don't know that that's this team. This team's better offensively than that team was.
Yeah.
But that was our problem with the Celtics last year, where it's like they can't score. They've just gotten better on that end. I don't have a real reason for it. I don't have because of X, Y, and Z. They just got better at it, and they're shooting the lights out. And especially because it looks like, and based off of you and I's projections, we agree on this, it's going to be Bucks, Sixers 2-3. So you don't have to go through either one of those. Like, I think there's pretty good. I think the Celtics are a good bet to win the Eastern Conference, even if the number doesn't have EV, even if I think it's priced about right. I still look at it and I go, do I trust the Bucks if they make the conference finals to knock down enough shots? No, I'm going to sit back with my preseason bets on the Bucks and be done. I don't want any money on the Bucks versus the Celtics. It's too much stress. Like, I'm going to save my heart. I'll probably wind up betting it because I'm a degen, but still, like, that's not a situation that I want. I definitely don't want the Sixers. We'll talk about another team a little bit later. But for me, like, what do you look at with, if we move past the regular season into the playoffs, what's your feeling on plus 115?
Yeah, I can't play the plus 115. I don't feel like that's a value for you to bet that right now. Plus 115, we're really close now to saying Boston versus the field in the East. Like, that would be plus 100, Boston versus the field. And I can't get there when the field has a second team, the Bucks, that I feel so strongly about. I personally would probably lean Bucks over Celtics. If I just had to pick one team, no odds, just one team to come out of the East, I think I would lean Bucks. I like them in that matchup. So that alone tells me I can take a plus 115 nearly versus the field position. But I think more so is this. We don't have a lot of regular season games left, but we got a long way to go till we get an Eastern Conference winner. There is no chance that you are buying, like, you're going to get a better price. You can wait and get a better price than plus 115 sometime. The chance is like Giannis has a season ending injury. Now your plus 115 is gone. Sorry about it. I'm not really banking on that. Otherwise, sometime when the Bucks make a push or the Sixers look great or the Celtics lose game one to the Hawks in the opening game of the playoffs or some stupid that could happen, you're going to get a better price. There's too much that can go awry. And you mentioned the injuries. I don't need to run to put in a plus 115 here. It's just not bettable for me right now.
Milwaukee Bucks are plus 185 to win the East title. Their win total is currently off the board at FanDuel based off of the injury to Giannis. Shams reported that there's like it was weird. I started hearing like some people being like, ooh, kind of some worries that he's seriously injured. And then Shams kind of reported like, no, it's probably gonna be okay. Like, could be a couple weeks, but not a big deal. Like, he's avoided major injury, which I think is promising. We don't have an official diagnosis yet, so we can kind of, go with what we've got here. Bucks are plus 185 to win the East title. They are plus 150 to win the top seed. Let me put it this way: if you're entering this blind and you haven't bet anything for top seed or you don't have any of our positions that we took, I do think that probably I like Bucks top seed. You're a little bit lower on Milwaukee, which I was a little surprised at, just relative to the standards. What is your thought on the Milwaukee Bucks? Let's start with the seeding stuff, and then we'll go to playoffs.
So I'm going to mention the projection I have here because it kind of feeds into the answers for your other questions. I came out originally at about 55.5 wins, and then I kind of manually adjusted down to where I have them at 54. 55.5 puts them much more in play to that 57 for Boston, that number one seed, all of that sort of stuff. The manual adjustment was a little bit of Giannis question mark. Chris Middleton still, I think, is going to get some rest. They're still kind of ramping him up toward the playoffs. Yeah. I just don't think that this team gives a rip about the next 6 weeks. All they need to care about is get Giannis and Chris healthy to the playoffs. They already know what happened last year when that didn't go their direction. And so far right now, we have 2 years of playoff evidence where one of them, they won the title, and the other one, they sure have to believe that they should have or been in the mix to at least make the finals when they took Boston to 7 games. Whether that's flawed logic or not is its own story, but they believe, the players believe that. So I don't see the motivation factor here to push. And so I think you sit a game where we're not expecting it right now, or you just kind of give a game away where we're not seeing it. So that was kind of where the manual adjustment down came. I personally, if I were going to bet one seed in the East, I just would take Boston. I'm not going to drink the heavy juice on a lot of these bets, but I just think the Celtics are that's 63%, the number you gave for them, minus 175. I just would put them higher than that. So to me, Milwaukee, I don't think Milwaukee cares if they're the 3 seed. I don't think the Bucks give a rip if they got to go face Philadelphia in a game 7 on the road. I mean, sure, you'd rather play in Milwaukee. You'd rather have the revenue. You'd rather have the home fans. But I think Milwaukee would far more happily sit Giannis and Chris for a game or 2 and risk that than risk the game 7 scenario. I don't think the Bucks think they're going to need a game 7 against the Sixers. I don't know why they would care about it.
I think my pushback here is that I think they can win anyway. Like, I think that they're good enough that even if they rest guys, they can find wins here. Like, their team is good enough. They're well coached. Like, we kind of saw that, right? Like, I know that your Bulls are pitiful, but like Giannis goes out and Brook has 30 plus and they just trounce him from the get-go, on the road.
RIP TNT Bulls.
Yeah, rest in peace TNT Bulls. So they really can, and if you want to say, well, yeah, it's the Bulls. And I'm like, well, they're not just going to be playing the Celtics the rest of the way. Like, they'll have these games where they can find ways, and they'll face other teams that are also resting guys, so they can find their way to that. I have them at 55.4. What's interesting about my projection is I was low on them all season. Everyone knows it. Like I was talking about, like I bet the under on them once I saw them in preseason. I was like, oh, this is rough. And then they were so bad offensively those first 2 months. I bet them again. I was like, this team is still being overvalued at 52.5, all these types of things. And then they flipped the switch and they've just been a complete destroyer of worlds. Right now, by the way, I have them manually upgraded a full 2 points over my full season projection.
Okay.
So my full season power rating, I have them at a 1, which is low, and I've updated them a full 2 points. For the full season, that number would come out as a 50-win team. But this is again the example of it. The Bucks were not a great team early, but they won games anyway. And so now we're at this point where they're really kind of like stuck in here. I'm just going to lose this position on the Bucks under 52.5. I'm fine with that. Like, yeah, I was right for 3 months and then they flipped the switch. I did just look this up while you were talking, and I do think it is relevant to what we're discussing here. I looked at after the All-Star break. So since 2019, they've won at a 64% clip in regular season games after the All-Star break. Or before the All-Star break. After the All-Star break, that goes to 67%. That's since 2019. So let's look at that since the title, right? Which is like they won the title, and obviously your priority in those games shifts. They still win at a 68% clip. So like that was last year, right? They went 15-7 last year after the All-Star break, straight up. Now they had to make up ground last year because Brooke was out. So I don't know how that factors into this. I don't think you're right or wrong, right? I think it's like, I don't disagree with your logic. I think it's messy enough to where this is a no bet for me on it from a seeding standpoint, just based off of those factors. Title, they're plus 185. You and I were very big on Eastern Conference. You and I were very big on them in like preseason. I think you and I both kind of agree that, in my opinion, Giannis is the best player in the Eastern Conference, and there's a pretty big gap for me. Like Joel's in that conversation, Tatum's in that conversation, but it's Giannis, and then the space, and then everybody else. Even Celtics fans will tell you how scared they are of him in a series. They got Jay Crowder. They gave up some depth. I'm still worried about the shooting. What do you think about the plus 185 title number for the Eastern Conference for the Bucks?
Yeah, we talked about when they got Jay Crowder. I said at the time I thought that was maybe the biggest trade deadline acquisition just in terms of direct title impact. Obviously, Kevin Durant is a slightly bigger acquisition, but just Crowder being on the court is such a big difference maker for them. Yeah, I wrestle with the profile of this team. If you go by expected wins, they are 6 wins above expectations right now. But like you said, doesn't matter. They already have all those wins. And the profile of what I think they are, what they should be healthy with Crowder now, is I think the best team in the East. And I think it's number 1, not 1A or 1B. I think they just are the best team. I would look at the plus 185 to bet them. 35% implied, I feel, is low. And I'm not sure you necessarily can wait to get a better number. The problem is now the Giannis injury. And it's just enough of an unknown. Like, I can't really imagine a scenario. I mean, the next time the Bucks play a truly meaningful game, it literally will be May, right? Like they're not going to get pushed in the first round in all likelihood. So now it's May. And if we already are saying this wasn't a real dangerous injury now, then it's hard to believe 2.5 months from now or whatever, that's going to be a factor. It's enough for me in a low enough number that I don't need to run to bet it. But I think if I were going to play an Eastern Conference title odds, it's Bucks or nothing for me. And I don't mind the plus 185 if you're not worried about Giannis.
Let's go to the Sixers. Sixers 51.5 plus 650 to win the Eastern Conference, 2,800 to win the top seed.
Wow.
I'm not saying that I want to double and triple down on our vast conference, our division title bets that we had on the Sixers in preseason. Oh. But I will say that, like, okay, the Sixers are 2 games back of the Celtics in the loss column. Just 2 games back of the Celtics in the loss column. They already missed Harden and Maxey for a long stretch of time. This is one of 3 teams that's top 10 in both offense and defense on the season, schedule adjusted at dunks and threes. I will say plus 2,800 for them to be the 1 seed is wrong. That's a wrong number.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I didn't look at that because I wasn't really considering Philly to make the 1 seed run. But man, that is a long number for being 2 games out. And a thing I like about the Sixers is the schedule kind of weirdly looks like it might break their way a little bit. So they have a pretty tough stretch coming out of the break. I don't mind that. You got to beat hard teams sometimes. We're rested, right? We just got Joel Embiid and James Harden a week off. If I have to play some tough games, yeah, now is the time when I'd like to do it. Thank you. Easy in March. So you kind of ease up, get through this tough stretch, ease into March. And then the schedule theoretically is tough later, but Milwaukee and Boston both come very late in the schedule. You might get a resting team, either or both of those games, yep. Teams that don't care as much. If I had to pick one of these top 4 East teams that I think absolutely cares and really wants to win, and they don't want the division banner, let's be real, but the 2 seed or the 1 seed, I think the Sixers care and would want that. They badly, badly want and need to finally make a conference finals, just that, if nothing else, and getting to home court in a 2-3 seed or 1 seed, even better. I think that matters. For me, I can't stop you from betting the 1 seed. The number just, it seems bad. The win total at 51.5, to me, of all these top teams, I like the over on that. I have them at about 53.5 wins. I just think they're going to push, and they got a lot of talent there. There's some cushion, even if Embiid misses a stretch or whatever. Now we got Maxey back, and everything is there to push for them getting some wins. They've got 25 games left as well, which is the most I think that any NBA team has, tied with a couple other teams. I only mention that just to say that, hey, that's more games you can win, right? We're at 38. We need to get to 52 to hit that over. You only need to go 14 wins, 14 and 11 to get there. And Philadelphia is good enough. They really should do that.
Yeah, I like the 51.5. It's a simpler bet. I have them at 53.9. So I've got a value on the over as well. I've already bet them. I started betting them pretty consistently early when they dipped because people were freaking out. They were just really freaking out about a lot of these, about the early start. And I was kind of like, I don't know about that. We'll see. And I was like, I buy into this, especially when the defense was essentially it hit the absolute dirt immediately. And then Embiid got himself in shape and then immediately just started to rebound. And it's been fine since then. Let me ask you this, because this is a good betting question from the how this podcast is. This is a good question for buckets. Let me confirm these numbers with you. Your range for the Celtics is 55 to 59 wins, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And your range for the Sixers is 50 to 55, right?
Yeah, that's what I've got. Yep.
So in order for the Sixers to pass the Celtics would either have to exceed your projected range or hit the very top of it. And the Celtics would have to hit the very floor of what you've got.
Right.
Does that cross-reference of outcomes reach more or less than a plus 2,800 implied?
It's a great question. Yeah, you're right. That is the right question to ask here. That crosshair of outcomes, the reason I do those ranges is that in my brain, as I think, could Philadelphia possibly catch Boston? It should immediately shoot red flags up in my brain of what? We got to have the best outcome of realistic Philly outcomes and the worst Boston outcome. We're already talking about, bottom 15 percentile outcome for Boston, maybe, and a top 15% outcome for Philly. And now we need both of them. Now they're not independent because they probably play again. And so some of that you're sharing results potentially on those, but yeah, it's a red flag to me that I need 2 far range outcomes to both happen for a bet. And don't forget, there's still other teams. I still need Milwaukee. My range for them is 52 to 57. We're not talking about division. We need the 1 seed. So now I also need Milwaukee to end up in the bottom half of their range.
Yeah. But you kind of said that you don't think the Bucks will go for it. I was kind of being If we
Sure.
take it implied, the Bucks won't be there, and we might get a binary into it's either going to be Sixers or Celtics, right? From a logic
Yeah.
standpoint, what's the number come out to be? Like, I know you got to factor in the possibility of like variance, because that's, I always say this, like that's the thing with the books, is the books are like, well, it's, you know, the MVP odds, it's like it could be, so it's like it could be Cam Thomas most improved player if things get really crazy, but it's not going to be,
Right.
right? Like the books have to
Well,
imply
that's
more variance than we do.
yeah. The hard part on this is we're getting to a spot where we're saying, okay, should it be 28-1 or should it be 32-1 or should it be 24-1? Well, the payout for us is significant, the difference on those. But if you flip it to percentages, it's like, well, is this a 3.2% chance of happening or a 2.8% chance of happening? Like, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Our brains don't operate that way. And I don't have a model set to run that right now. But I think, though, that's why, you know me, I love the long shots. If you think that you're in a range where there might be some value, that's where, like, even a plus 2,800 probably implies if you shop around at some books, you might find a plus 2,000 somewhere. And again, the odds haven't changed too much for you in that, but the payout, you're getting $8 extra for every dollar you bet on it. So I think on the long shots, if you like a long shot, you just have to kind of like it and not really know if the percentage is exactly right in your favor, and just lay it and go for it.
Okay. Sixers to win the Eastern Conference at plus 650 is a little interesting to me. Here's the problem, is like, I'm about to say a bunch of stuff from here on out that is a little bit contradictory, and I still haven't figured it out, which is why I'm going to wait on Eastern Conference futures until the playoffs get here. Like I've said this before, I want to see the bracket, because if the Sixers are in the 4 seed and they have to face the Celtics, I want no part of them. If the Sixers are where I think they will be, which will be the 3 seed, now I'm a little interested. I just don't have enough confidence that, like, if you told me like, oh, the Cavs wound up going on a win streak and they got the third seed. Okay. Like, sure. I need to make sure whatever happens, I cannot bet the Sixers if there is any possibility that they have to face Boston before the conference finals. I can only bet the Sixers if I know they won't face Boston before the conference finals. They can't beat Boston. I need as many teams in the way. I want, as like, the ideal would be that like the Heat go on a tear and the Sixers get the or the Sixers, as we talked about, they get the 1, right? If the Sixers get the 1 seed, I love them, but if I should just bet them at the plus 2,800 to get the 1 seed, and then I guess like I could bet them to win the title then or whatever. But like, that's the only scenario in which I like them, and then the number is going to shorten, because it's going to be like, well, we have to shorten the number because the Sixers have home court, so they get a lower number. That if you're a Sixers better, that's what you want, is for them to take off now, overcome Boston, finishes the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, have Cleveland in 4, Miami or the Knicks in 5, and then the Sixers have a cakewalk to the conference finals, while Boston and Milwaukee have to have another war in round 2. That to me is the only way that you can look at betting the Sixers. I have to know that before I bet on the Sixers to win the conference.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. And I still don't want to bet the Sixers. All the love we've given them, all of our preseason podcasts, we're both very clear on. We are talking about regular season outcomes for this team.
Yes.
I'm still not there on putting my hard-earned cash on James Harden or Joel Embiid in a 10-week playoffs. I'm just going to have to see it at some point. I'm going to have to see the 10, not the like 4 weeks or the 6 weeks. I'm going to have to see a little more than that. I just can't get there yet. Certainly not right now, this far away.
Because here's one of the things: if the Sixers win the 1 seed, and they face the Celtics in the conference finals, and they have home court, who do you think is favored in that series? I think Boston's favored.
I don't think so, because I think right now, today, in that hypothetical scenario, Boston's favored. But 2 months from now, 3 months from now, when the Sixers have just beaten 2 other teams and earned the 1 seed, and Embiid looked like the MVP of the closing stretch, and Boston fell off a little bit to fall behind, I think perception will have changed along the way to then make Philadelphia favored. I think right now you're right. I think they should be, but something 28-1 had to have happened along the way,
Yeah.
and more outcomes. The Sixers still have to win 2 times in the playoffs and be healthy. That's also like 28-1, right? So
Well,
I think
I need
conceptually,
a
you're
book to
right.
let me parlay the number 1 seed and win the title, because I think that the winning the title is correlated heavily to getting the 1 seed. I want a book to let me have that.
Yeah,
Because then
I
I
think
have
you're
the
right to think of those similarly.
Yeah.
Because yeah, any other scenario, that's why stretching for the 1 seed would be such a big deal for them. And it's also, you mentioned the Boston matchup. It's part of why I still like the over for them, because another way that you hit the over is just, oh my gosh, we can't fall to the 4 seed. That's Boston 1 round earlier. So you at least want to stay above the 4. Like, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, every seed matters for Philly, and they're going to want to push as high as possible, more than any of those other teams.
I do want to note this. It's one, they have to finish tied, so it's a very specific thing, but you'd be surprised when we get to this level, teams wind up tied a lot. Currently, Boston's 2-0 versus Sixers. They're up 2-0 out of 4. They have 2 more matchups remaining. The Sixers have to go 2-0 just to split season tiebreaker. And even then, based off of division, the Celtics are 8-1. The Sixers are 7-5. So like, that's the next tiebreaker. So what you're talking about there is, in order for them to get the 1 seed, they have to catch them. And even if they tie them, Boston probably wins tiebreaker. So
right. And so that's the thing too, is like, that's why we're at 28-1, is because now we're talking about like effectively a same game parlay, a same season parlay of, Philly has to win both of those games. They have to win, because if they even split, they lost 2 games of possible ground to make up on them. Yeah. And they lost the tiebreak. So now you're 3 games back to make up ground and only like 20 games left. Like, so your 28-1 is almost certainly betting on winning both games against the team that's been best in the league all season. So we're starting with that. And then you still have to be better than them the rest of the way and still win a tiebreaker. That's why we got to the 28-1, because we're asking a lot to happen.
Cavs are at 50.5 on the win total line, plus 1,100 to win the Eastern Conference. We'll talk about that in a second. Plus 4,000 to win the top seed. They are a full 6 games back in the loss column from the Celtics. That's dead. The Cleveland Cavaliers will not win the top seed in the Eastern Conference. You and I don't have to do anything here, because I joined you when they first came out. You bet them again after the Mitchell trade at 48.5. You're going to cash that. I stayed away from the number at that point, but I had enough of position that I'm looking good there. Cavs 50.5. I have them projected currently. I have them at 51.7. So a full, game and a half over on this. If you haven't bet it yet, I like the Cavs over. I think they hit a midseason lull. I still think this team is great. I still think this team is more elite than they're being given credit for. We'll talk about their title odds for the East in a second, but what do you think about the number on 50.5 to win the over on their season 1 total?
Yeah, I'm about in lockstep with what you just said on this. Like, I didn't spend long on the Cavs just because I have such a big position on them already, but I feel good about, if I was going to play the 50.5, it certainly is an over for me, but it's a pass just because I've already beat the number. The 600 plus 600 to win the division, I think would be maybe interesting. But again, I've got that position as well. I don't think it's going to hit. I think the Bucks probably are going to hang on and take care of business. I have Cleveland actually around 52.5, 53. So I have a little higher than you. It's a really soft schedule. And they've got 5 teams at the end of the season, basically right at the end, that I think are all going to be tanking. So I think they're going to just kind of coast into the playoffs with a bunch of wins. The problem also, though, with the over that you have to be careful with, if you don't think Cleveland is good enough to push to get higher in the seeding, there's a real gap after them. And so if they don't push to get to the 3 seed, there's no danger of falling below. And then suddenly it's like, hey, you know what, Don, why don't you take a night off? Why don't you just rest? We got some more important games. We think we can actually win a couple series here. Let's just punt this game tonight, because at some point, if you're actually around 49 to 50 wins and that number near the end, nobody else is near you, above or below. And now the games don't matter. And you don't really want a team like, we don't want Chetty Osman playing for our over on the last couple games of the season, no matter who they're playing against. So I think for me, it's just a stay away team for right now. I'm happy with the positions we have already. We got the 41.5 over from way back before all the Donovan Mitchell stuff. So 4 more wins, baby, 4 more, and then we'll catch that one.
So we've got some to make the playoff odds, and I want to mostly ask you about. We'll talk about some of your other best bets. You've got some bets on some of the middle and lower teams, but I want to ask you about to make the playoffs. Is the time right now, do you think, to attack the make or miss markets? This one's always like tough because I just think that this is too sharp a market. That's my opinion, is that
Yeah.
these numbers are too sharp. Like the Hawks are minus 162 to make the playoffs. Well, their starting lineup when fully healthy is actually one of the better ones in the league. They should be better. Now it's the Hawks who just fired their coach before we got on this podcast, by the way, breaking news. Or, like the Knicks are minus 400. Would love to get the Knicks at a lower number, but the Knicks are good enough and have a clearance level. They're minus 400. I don't want to bet something where I have to lay minus 400, even if I think that there's EV on it. I'm just like, no, especially don't want to bet the Knicks on anything that's a minus 400. Before we talk about some of these individual teams, what's your general strategy on make miss playoffs at this point?
Yeah. I think the key is the seeding and where you expect these teams to be. I think I only want to play make playoffs for the teams that books are appropriately pricing out of range for us to care to want to play them. Like same with the Knicks. Like I like the Knicks. We're going to talk about them. I don't want to lay the minus 400. I don't need to. The number we talked about with the 28-1, where it's like, well, is the percentage off just a little bit? At minus 400, where 80% implied has to happen. All right, so I think it's probably 83 or 85% or whatever the number is. Well, it's super great, but do I really need that margin? Do I need to play that? It's not worth tying my money up for a few months to win a quarter of my investment back at the end. It's just not worth it too much to me. And then on the other end, my caution would be this. The bet I would not play right now is, hey, I like Washington. I like Minnesota. I like this play-in team that I think is going to be in the play-in. I like them to go ahead and win that play-in matchup and make the playoffs. Don't play that bet right now. I don't think those odds are in your favor because you're entering a scenario where you're in a single elimination game and possibly two. Like we kind of do the thing. There's been a lot of discourse after the trade deadline about not all first round picks are the same thing. I think we need to talk about not all play-in is the same thing. Yeah. If you're the 7 or the 8 or 9 or 10, those are very different seeds. Great. Congratulations. You're still alive in the postseason. But if you like Washington, you're like, yeah, I think they get up to the 8 seed. They could beat Miami and make it in. Well, that's great. But oops, they're the 9 seed. Now they have to win twice. And they had to still make that seed and win twice just to cash your make the playoffs ticket. So I think if you want to play this sort of angle, you either have to just swallow hard and drink the juice on the team you're really, really sure is good enough to get out of the play-in and actually qualify straight. That's why you're betting them. Or you need to go the other way and take a team like the Hawks because you don't like them, or the Warriors or Lakers because you don't like them, and play to miss the playoffs. If you're playing one of those 8, 9, 10, 11 teams, I'm not playing to make right now. I'm playing to miss.
Let's talk about some of these individual teams, and we'll get into our best bets here. We'll just go ahead and talk about those. Let's talk about the Knicks. So you got the Knicks over 43.5 as one of your best bets on the board here. Currently, the Knicks are in the 6th spot, 33-27, pretty good record. You had kind of texted me being like, what's the deal with the Knicks? Because it looks like they're good. And then I showed you their 10-game splits, and you were like, oh, okay, I get it now. I have them projected for number 2 close to this. I have them at 44.4. This is less than a game. I just don't want to lean over with a number that close. I might look at some seeding opportunities with them. But why do you like the Knicks as a best bet over 43.5?
Yeah, I like the profile. I got a little scared off of it by what we were talking about, but I think even as you look, it's so up and down, right? They started out well, and then I think lost 12 out of 19. And then they immediately went on that big December winning streak and then ended the winning streak by losing 5 in a row. And then they won 7 of 8 and then they lost 4 in a row. So it's when is the next losing streak going to come? And they just won 5 of 6 into the break. So is it now, right? That's how the season has gone so far. So I think that's the worry. Overall, though, despite all the really bad parts that are included, they're 7th in net rating. They're 6th in offensive rating. Jalen Brunson, I think it took them a while to kind of find his place on this team. It's clearly his team now, and I think that's worked well. I think Josh Hart has been a nice addition already for them slotting in. Since start of December, they're a 50-win team on pace. So I like the profile here. I think that with Tibbs, we know they're going to play hard. We know they're going to push all the way. They are in a group of teams, New York, Brooklyn, Miami. They're 5, 6, 7, where they're not going to catch someone above, but you really, really want to not be the 7. You want to stay above so you can avoid that play-in. I just think they push hard and are going to try all the way. I don't really love Brooklyn or Miami regular season either. So this is a little bit of bet on New York and against them. I just think they push for it. I have them around 45.5, 46 wins. So real clearance on the 43.5. I like the over. It's my favorite win total in the East right now. And then the other one too is you can bet the under seeding, under 6.5 on the seed, which is plus 145. So now I just need them to not be the 7 seed, basically. I need them to finish ahead of either Brooklyn or Miami. And I like that kind of as an escalator there where we're going to need to hit the win total. But I think that I have them finishing ahead of both of them. I just think it's a quality team.
The Knicks that you're talking, sorry. You are right though. I actually like them. I've enjoyed watching them this year. They've been really good. I actually think that like they play better than their record. And so here's I'm going to try and talk you off of it.
Okay.
The win profile is extremely alarming.
Yeah.
Let's start here. What are games that you like high probability win situations at home? 16 and 15. Like they're a half game over 500 at home. That's concerning. Next up, division games. Okay, they've played 13 of the 16, but 3 out of the 24 or whatever remaining games is actually like that's a significant little chunk there. They're only 5 and 8 versus the division. That's concerning. They're pretty good versus the conference. That's encouraging, but they're going to actually play the Western Conference quite a bit here because they're already at 39 conference games. So like something to kind of consider there. How about if we look at their win profile? Bad versus teams over 500, 11 and 16, but that's actually fine because you're not supposed to be great in those games. More concerning is that they're 21 and 11 versus teams below 500. That's really like when you're already in double digits for losses to sub 500, that's a concern. Like that should be a little bit of a red flag here. It indicates that if nothing else, they are slightly more likely than the teams that they are competing with to lose to bad teams. Now, Miami's only 18 and 13. So this is where it gets into the interesting question of New York doesn't have to be good. They just have to not be as bad as the other teams. Atlanta is 15 and 14 in those spots. So the teams that they're competing with, you have like an argument to say they don't have to be good. They're just better than those. The other thing that I would kind of point to here is they're hyper variant. So they have 17 wins by double digits. That's compared to Brooklyn, who's only got 15. The Sixers only have 19. But the Knicks also have 12 losses by double digits. That's compared to Boston and Philly, who have 8, the Bucks that have 10, the Cavs that have 8. Like, put it this way, the Bulls are 15 and 13 in double-digit games. Well, they've won 15 by double digits, lost 13. The Knicks are 17 and 12. They're more Bulls-like than they are some of these other kind of situations. They profile a lot more like the Bulls than they do closer to one of these better teams. So that's my concern for you. Have I managed to talk you off of it, or do you want to go ahead and keep it?
No, I'm going to keep it as a best bet, but you managed to talk me out of it being like a multi-unit best bet into just a more traditional one.
Just like a little bit of a bet there. Okay.
I mean, it's it's funny because as I think about my Chicago Bulls, I've been thinking lately that they are starting to remind me a lot of the Knicks franchise, and
Yeah.
it's one of those where neither franchise is particularly excited to be compared to the other. Like I'm not sure who's more insulted, but they're definitely both mad that you brought it up. But at the end of the day, just the number 43 and a half. The Knicks have 33 wins. They only have to win 11 more games to get there. They only have 22 left, but 11 and 11, 500 ball the rest of the way gets us there. They've been a 50 win pace since start of December. You're right. I see the things they're saying. I know we're going to get to the end and you're going to be like, you see, they're here they go, 10 and 12 down to the finish. I just, I bet
Okay,
on
now
Tibbs.
this is a good team. Like this is not like the Knicks are not fraudulent. They're a good team. Here's what's really interesting is like you're basing it off of their overall profile, and their overall profile is that they're a good team because they are. They just don't know how to win, and that to me is like
Yeah.
they've won enough, but it's been such a much of a roller coaster.
Yeah.
I can't trust them to get to the finish line. I need a 30-second digest from you. It's all we have time for on Pacers under 35 and a half.
So we got an article going up, probably up as you listen to this at Action Network about tanking. I think the Pacers are a soft tank team. I think they're a team that is going to look around the bottom four in the NBA. They're out, like they're their own thing. I think the Pacers are positioned to make a run, quote unquote, at the fifth worst record. And if you look at the lottery odds, that matters. To be the fifth worst team instead of the eighth worst, the 10th worst team, you're increasing your odds at possibly getting Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson, who's really good too. You're increasing by like 3 times your chance of doing that. They have lost, the Pacers, 16 of their last 19, including 2-6 with Halliburton back. I just think it's done. I think that they're done. I think they want to tank. I think they want that high draft pick and lottery odds. Under 35 and a half, they've got to win 12 of 22. They have to go 12 and 10 to go over that number. I don't think they could, even if they try. And I don't know that they want to, especially if the losses start to come. They're a team that I think quickly pulls the rug out.
I asked the folks this weekend about the Pacers, not anybody in Indy, just folks around the league. And someone said something very interesting to me. I said, I can't figure out what's going on with them because they were playing really well. And now like they've just really fallen off. And he said, that's something that you actually find a lot with tanking teams is that inexplicably they just start to play a little bit worse. No, it's not like obvious. It's not like, oh, we just sat this guy. Like sometimes you get that injury. It's like they just start to play worse. And then that justifies like, okay, now we'll shut this guy down. The tanking stuff is always very slow. And so like, I thought that was very notable. Does that tie into one of your other best bets, which is you like?
Yeah, let me make the case for 2 long shots here and see if I can sell you on either one. I'll go quick on both, but they're related to each other. So 2 bets I'm looking at. I don't like Miami a lot. I don't like their regular season profile. I don't trust their injuries. I don't think that they're going to push hard. I don't think they care about seeding either. I think Jimmy Butler and Bam, they don't give a rip who they play. They'll take you right now. They'll play the play-in. They don't really care. Just let me in the playoffs. We'll beat you anyway. So I'm trying to look, how do I fade Miami? Here are 2 ways. Number 1, I mentioned that kind of 5, 6, 7 range. Miami's play-in odds are plus 150. I looked at that. It's not quite enough for me to care. However, I don't really see them falling further than the 7th seed. So Miami to be the exact 7th seed is plus 320. Basically, that is a bet for Miami to finish below New York and Brooklyn, who they're below right now, and then just stay above the other teams. I don't really see Atlanta, Washington, Toronto really pushing them, except here's the other half. Washington division odds, 13-1 right now at FanDuel. Washington, 5th in net rating, last 15 games. They're kind of good, right? Like they're kind of, I think you would say similar stuff about them like you might about New York, you just did. They're kind of fine. They're kind of a 500-ish team. I just don't think Miami has the push to pull away. Miami is right now 4 wins ahead. They're 2-1 up on Washington head to head. So it's not going to be easy. That's why it's 13-1. But what do you think about either of those ways to fade Miami? And if you were going to pick either of them, which would you choose?
I actually like it. I like it. So I looked at this since December 14th, which is kind of when the Heat stopped being as bad and kind of started to stabilize. I was like, well, let's look and see. Like, I'm going to show Brandon this stretch of games where they've been good. The Heat are 19-12 since December 14th with a 1.4 net rating. The Wizards are 17-13 in that stretch with a plus 2.9. So they've played about even in the win in the record, and they've had almost double or a point and a half better in point differential. So like, look, it's crazy to me that like, and we've been trying to figure out this Atlanta or this Southeast Division all year. None of these teams are good. The Hawks just fired their coach. Don't mind the 13-1. That's great payout. If you hit it, you're just like, woohoo. My only concern is that, and I've said this, I got in some heat with Wizards fans about this, about I don't know what the motivation is for Washington right now.
Yeah.
And that's not just like an organizational thing. Like, I don't feel like Brad Beal is like, we got to make the play in, guys. I think Brad Beal is like, I get paid no matter what, guys. And so without that, they didn't make any significant trades outside of Rui. I don't know if they will be able to win tough games that they need to in order to make it in. I like their roster. I like how they've played. I don't know if I like them enough because like this also just kind of feels like much like Bucks in the division. Miami's just going to find a way to do this. Like, it's going to be ugly. You and I are going to be like, this team's not good. And then we're just going to be sitting with them as the 6th seed again.
Yeah, I think that's fair. With Washington, another thing too, that's kind of a weird complicating factor. Washington it is in the Wizards franchise best interest to finish bottom 14, aka not make the playoffs, because they get to keep their draft pick if it is 14th or better. Otherwise, it is gone. And that it conveys a while forward where they're probably going to keep on keeping it for a while. I think it's one of those Knicks draft picks that they got in the trade. So that's a weird thing too, where look, they could still win the division and make the play in and then just lose the play in and still get that number 14 pick back. But I think that's a weird complicating factor too, where there is some organizational motivation to maybe shut things down. It's just that that's been there before and it hasn't stopped them the last 2 months, and it didn't make them trade their guys away like I think they should. And I certainly want them to blow it up and do some different thing than just be the freaking Wizards stuck in the middle. They don't seem to care about that. So if they're going to not care, I guess I will not care and let them win some games. You got any other best bets from the East?
Yeah, I got 2. I've only got 2, but I do like these quite a bit. I actually have, and we didn't talk about this because I wanted to save it for best bets. I have Cavs to win the Eastern Conference title at plus 1100. I put that in the app. I think this number shortens as the Cavs go on a little bit of a run here. They've gotten healthier. They figured out some stuff. They've had some like their record with Garland and Mitchell is excellent. They're really good. Like, when they have their guys, they're really good, and they've already had some injury stuff. I don't think the Kevin Love buyout hurts them. I think it's fine. They should have made a trade for a wing, sure. The reason I like this is because if, like, you and I agree that it looks like it's going to be Boston 1, Philly or Milwaukee 2, and then Philly or Milwaukee 3, which leaves 4 for the Cavs. They're going to get the Knicks or the Heat in a 5-6, maybe the Hawks or the Wizards. They'll get one of those teams. So the 4-5 won't be as tough because I think Cleveland is a tier above those teams. Yeah, I think Cleveland is closer to Boston. Usually it's not that. Usually it's like Boston, Philly, Milwaukee, and then there's a drop off and there's Cleveland. That's what the market says. I don't think that that's it. I think Cleveland is much closer to Boston, Philly, Milwaukee in overall team quality, which means they should be able to handle the 4-5. And if they do, they are the only team that I like the value on them going against the Celtics. That doesn't mean that I'm like, I'm stone cold lock. They're going to beat Boston. Boston might beat the shit out of them because the Cavs have never really made a playoff run, but they won the 2 previous season meetings. We'll see what happens as they finish up that season series. It's not about beating them in the regular season. I don't care about that. It's about the matchup. And it's that a lot of what Boston does gets negated by the kind of team that Cleveland has built. The 2 big hyper athletic guys can both cover Horford on the perimeter. They can, if they're like, we're going to go Horford small, fine, no problem. We can either match you big and overwhelm you with size and kill you on the offensive glass, Or we can play Evan Mobley at 5 if we absolutely need to. If Jared Allen's not there, we'll play Evan Mobley in those minutes at 5. Oh, we're going to take Horford off the floor and we're going to run 1-4 pick and roll with Robert Williams. Fine. We're putting Jared Allen at 5 and we're going to counter you with switch all with Chetty. They have a lot of depth. Chetty Osman, by the way, amongst qualifying bench players, best net rating in the league for amongst the bench player. Like, that's really surprising to me, given what the benches look like in various games. I don't worry as much about the shooting because so much of their problem shooting is in the minutes when Donovan's off the floor. Donovan can fire off of, Donovan can hit threes on his own. They have all-star level guards. They have all-star level forwards. They're weak on the wing. It's going to be Okoro getting smashed by Tatum for 7 games. But I would look to bet the Cavaliers at on a series line price. But at 11-1, with the amount of variance that's built in here, I like this a lot because they could actually make it to a conference finals. I would bet the other team in a conference finals, regardless of which of the other two they make. But that's enough to get me on board with plus 1100 for the Cavs to win the East.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I like the Cavs a lot. I agree that we are talking about a 4-team Eastern Conference. Like, I don't think you need to make great plans for round 1 of the Eastern playoffs. I think you can go ahead and still have some late dinners and settle in for the Western Conference games those nights. I don't think we're going to get much happening in round 1. We got 4 teams. We know who they are. And I personally, here's how I would do it a little differently than you. I'm going to put Boston and Milwaukee together in a tier alone away from the next 2. So to me, I just think Boston or Milwaukee, and that's it in the East. I think it's one of those teams, and I don't give anyone else much of a chance. But I'll put Cleveland ahead of Philadelphia after that. In the playoffs, we've done all the Philly regular season stuff. But you know why I like Cleveland and not Philadelphia? Here's why. They don't have James Harden or Joel Embiid. They got other dudes, and I've seen Donovan Mitchell perform in the playoffs, and he might be the only one that's been here before, but the dude shows up and is really good here and can really step it up. And you're right. I like the formula. I like the defense. I think Donovan, before the season or before they got Donovan Mitchell, I think probably I was wrong in my highest optimism for the Cavs. I don't think they had enough offense to go to one of these series you're talking about. Donovan changes that and gives them a chance. They're still going to not be the better team, but he gives them a chance there. I think I'd still rather just bet Milwaukee or Boston or wait for the spot for that. But I will take Cleveland over any chance to bet Philly in the playoffs every time. So I wonder for you, you got it at 1100. What number would it stop being a value for you? Like, what's your range? What would be your cutoff?
Probably 8-1.
Yeah,
8-1.
that's about, I guess.
Play the series. I'm probably just going to go ahead and play the series at 8-1. That's about what
yeah. Well, I think both of us are saying we think the Cavs are in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Pretty much like not a stone cold lock, but we think that there is as much in that spot as these other 3 teams.
Yep.
If that's the case, I don't think you're getting 11-1 on Cleveland or whatever the bracket is at that point. So I think that you go ahead and get the number now if you like their chances.
The other one I like is the over on the Orlando Magic, 33.5. I have them at 34. And Brandon, because I have been podcasting with you too long, I will bet plus 1,300 to make the play in. That's right.
Right.
I have them projected currently at 34 wins. I have them out, but I have the Raptors at 38. I have the Pacers at 35. The last team in would be the Chicago Bulls at 38 currently. And so I'm projecting like the Magic at 4 above where I've got them currently projected. I haven't done a manual adjustment on Orlando based off of their regular season performance. Basically what happened was they were without a point guard. They lost both point guards early. Didn't have a point guard for like 2 months of the season. Got a point guard, but then lost their center, Wendell Carter Jr., and Paolo was out some. And when they finally like have gotten everybody back together and they have all their assortment, the numbers for the starting unit that you want to see with Suggs and Markelle and Paolo and Wagner and WCJ are not great. They're still a minus, but they're much closer to like a 38 win team. And they have figured out like Mosley's coaching his ass off. I still kind of wonder about, like, Toronto's is probably the boring answer here for where the value is, but at 13-1, I'll take a flyer on the Orlando Magic. I'm already going to hit I'm basically going to free roll my 27.5 over that they're going to hit on the win total and put a sprinkle of that on 13-1 to make the play-in.
Yeah, I would lean over here. I'm just not interested in putting my money on Orlando. They're a team that you've had a little more interest in the whole season.
You got to watch
I think
them,
your
buddy.
case.
You're gonna love them. Just watch a couple of games. You're gonna love them.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen them recently. It's a fun team. I remember first week of the season watching this team and being like, "Oh man, I missed the boat. This is a fun team." And they kind of went off the rails a while. This is pretty good again. Here's my one caution for you and my fear for your bet. I like the over. If I had to pick a side, it's what I'd play. I don't think they're a tank team. I think they're one of those where Brandon wants them to tank, but team culture and wins profile and like learning, the young guys learning to win, I think that's a thing. Here's my problem. At some point, even when you're not a tank team, you might become a tank team if the profile gets there. The schedule out of the All-Star break, pretty soft. Like they can win some games. They can believe, hey, we're hanging around. But if it goes, last 4 games of the season, Orlando plays the Cavs again, at Brooklyn, at Miami. All 4 teams who probably are trying to win. Brooklyn and Miami are probably trying to get out of that play-in at the end. If Orlando starts to slip a little bit, that is an L4 to end the season waiting to happen. And I really don't need your ticket sitting on like, all right, 1 week left. All I need is one more win. And then they're just like, yeah, but we could jump 3 spots in the lottery odds. And I think we're good here with this last week. That's my only concern there.
All right, let's get wrap it up for Buckets. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Check out tomorrow's episode where we got the Western Conference. Make sure to download the Action Network app. Best way for you to track your picks. Get all sorts of great up to the second information. We're on Green Dot Daily pretty much every day. We'll be on even more as the playoffs approach. Get all your March Madness. Get started. Start researching for March Madness. Get ahead of your buddies so your bracket's going to absolutely kick ass. Make sure to do that. You can follow Brandon on Twitter at Wheaton Brando. I'm on Twitter at HP Basketball. Action Network's on Twitter at Action Network HQ. My thanks to David Payne for producing. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. Let's get buckets.